not one underdog of 7.5 points or more won a game outright. So it only went from 40-80 to 21-31 in 7 weeks. And then in a 15-day period from week 8 to week 10, 90+% of the remaining entries knocked out, so that there were only 173 left after this past week. Well, this week, 39 more got knocked out, most of those on the Tennessee Titans. And so here you go. You have 134 entries left out of 4,080. Each of those 134 remaining entries has an intrinsic value of $44,776. We're talking about real money, y'all. From this point forward, this is going to get unbelievable. Remember, it's a $6 million prize. $7 million, I think, if you used Kansas City or Tampa Bay the final week. Let's not worry about that. Each has an intrinsic value of $44,776 based on the $6 million prize. Now, of the remaining 134, 3 people have 3 entries left. 9 people have 2 entries left, best we can tell on those, right? Because we're just assuming people named them entry 1, entry 2, entry 3, so on and so forth, up to a max of 6. If somebody out there is using different names, then that's a different story. But as best we can tell, 3 people have 3 entries, 9 have 2 entries, which would mean that there's, of the 134 remaining entries, there are 119 different people still alive. By the way, this also speaks to what I've been saying all year, which is everybody bragging about how they have like, oh, all my 6 entries are still alive and it's week 7. I'll say it again for the 10,000th time. Your extra entries are relatively nonsense until you get to Thanksgiving week. Because you don't, by definition, you're not playing. Most people are not playing their extra entries the same way they're playing what's going to be their final remaining one. And so by definition, you are not playing those optimally. And the proof is in the pudding. I was right. 11 people ended up having multiple entries heading into this Thursday. 11. So I don't know how many different people started with the 4,080, but let's say it's 3,000. Jeff, would you have an estimate on that? Who knows, right? How many different people played the 4,080? Let's say it's 3,000 different people. I don't know if that's low or high or whatever. But you're still only talking about 0.5% of people who ended up with extra entries. Having extra entries is largely just something to make people feel good most of the time and ultimately only matters to a very select few in the end. So here we are. 3 have 3, 9 have 2, 119 different people. Of the 3 entry entrants, one of them has used both Buffalo and Dallas already heading into Thanksgiving. So they're in a pickle. Another one of the 3 has used Buffalo. You would assume that they would use Dallas in 1. I mean, what can we assume with that one? That person, let's take the one that has used both Buffalo and Dallas. The one that has used both Buffalo and Dallas, what do? 2 Chicago and 1 Detroit, just to assure that they get at least 1 through? Because remember, that's the benefit of having multiple entries now. The one that has burned Buffalo, one has used Buffalo, but still has Dallas available. What do? 2 Dallas and 1 Chicago? And then one has Buffalo and Dallas both available. That person is in the best position. But if you were power ranking everybody right now, that person's the number 1 power ranked team of the remaining 119 people, because they could essentially use 1 on all 3 favorites this weekend or this Thursday if they wanted to. By the way, of the 2 entry entrants, if you were wondering, 2 have used both Buffalo and Dallas. We don't want to break that down even further. You figure those people will split Chicago and Detroit to advance 1. Although I'd like to make a point about this later. Let's bookmark that. Let's go to the other screen here. By the way, if Detroit, let's say there's a scenario this Thanksgiving, so essentially what I just talked about, if Detroit, Vegas, and New Orleans all win, let's say all the underdogs win. I know, not likely, but let's say they do. You're probably only going to have 3 or 4 people left, 3 or 4 entries left out of the 134. If you have a nightmare scenario where all the dogs win outright on Thursday based on those multiple entrants that I just talked about, you'll probably only have 3 or 4 people left in this, 3 or 4 entrants. Okay, of the 134 remaining entries then, breaking them down as a whole group, 37 have used Buffalo and Dallas. 37 of the remaining 134 entries have already burned Buffalo and Dallas. Guess they got to go Chicago on Thursday. 68 of the 134 remaining entries have used Buffalo, but not Dallas. They got to take Dallas, right? 15 have taken Dallas, but not Buffalo. Now, here's the question. Do any of those players get nervous with Dallas's injuries and take Chicago? And then 14 of the remaining 134 entries have Buffalo and Dallas both available. Who knows how those break down? 10 to Dallas, 4 to Buffalo, whatever your instincts tell you. But those are the 100, that's the 134 entry roadmap, if you will. 37 have used them both. 68 have used Buffalo but not Dallas. 15 have used Dallas but not Buffalo. 14 have both Buffalo and Dallas available. So there's a couple questions. One, does anyone take New Orleans? Anyone at all? Your instinct, Jeff?
They shouldn't.
Not a one?
I wouldn't.
I mean, the only possibility would be one of the multiple entries one, and even then it doesn't make sense.
No, if you have multiple entries left and you want to split, you split either of the first two games.
Okay, so this brings me to my biggest point about all this. So we just talked about how I've said 100 times on all these different shows, on the Megapod, here on A Numbers Game, on Primetime Action, how the notion of having extra entries for 99% of the people doesn't matter in the end. Of the 11 people, again, 3 with 3 entries, 8 with 2 remaining, of all those people, they've gotten to the promised land here now, Thanksgiving, where they have multiple entries. And so in their heads, the entire season to this point, they've thought to themselves, well, if I get to Thanksgiving with multiple entries, I'm going to split so that I guarantee one goes through. Here's the question, Jeff. Now, how much of those of those 11 remaining people with multiples, does the human element kick in after all these 2.5 months where they've decided, if I have multiple entries, I'm going to split to guarantee one goes through? Does their brain now twist on them and say, wait a minute, I don't want to sacrifice 1 or 2 of these. I want to get all of mine in, whether it's 2 or 3. I'm not doing splits at all. Of the remaining 11 that have that, do you think someone will not split? Because the brain will do a funny thing to you now at this point. You've waited all year to get to this point, and now you're like, wait a minute, I want to have multiple entries after Thanksgiving, especially because Sunday, this coming Sunday, is so ridiculously difficult. Because if you have 2 and you split, you might not get past Sunday. Of the 11 people, 3 with 3, 8 with 2, who ended up with multiple entries heading into Thanksgiving, does now their brain play a trick on them where they're like, you know what? Now that I'm here, I don't want to split these. I want to get all through. Again, intrinsic value of each of these, $44,776. All right, so this is to get the number 1 seed in the AFC, courtesy of our proud sponsors, BetMGM, here on A Numbers Game. The Tennessee Titans. Remember, he has them power ranked 20th. He's not alone. Football Outsiders has them near that as well. And I want to say that Pro Football Focus does as well. But the Tennessee Titans, the biggest conundrum in the NFL this year, at this moment, that's how low they're power ranked by analytics people. And yet, to get the AFC's number 1 seed, they are your short shot in the betting market. They are plus 175. Now, keep in mind, only one team gets a bye in the postseason. So if you get the number 1 seed, remember this started last year when they expanded to 7 teams for a conference in the postseason, it is such a monster advantage simply because you don't have to play in that first round. You immediately advance to the divisional round. And there's no wild card weekend for you. And with the Titans, imagine if they can get through these last, 6 games for them? They can get through these last 6 games. Then then they would be the number 1 seed. If they could get to the number 1 seed, then they would theoretically already have gotten Julio Jones back, and they will most importantly get Derrick Henry back. One would assume for the postseason, but they're plus 175. Plus 175. The Titans right now atop the AFC. They do have the best record at 8-3. So 6 games left. And those games are at the Patriots this week, where they are a 6-point dog. Then their bye week. Then it's home Jacksonville, at Pittsburgh, home Niners, home Dolphins, at Texans. So, Jeff, it's the second easiest remaining schedule in the National Football League. Remember, all their hard games, they've won them all, and it's behind them. But again, they did lose to the Texans outright this past weekend. So nothing, as they're currently constituted, is given. Would you bet them plus 175? Best record, easiest schedule of the remaining AFC teams?
Not at that number.
Not at plus 175. I would agree with you.
Not at plus 175.
Not at that number. I would agree. I'm a little surprised they're that short of a shot compared to everybody else. And I'm Mr. Titans, right? I have them to win it all based on all of those factors. They're the biggest conundrum because as currently constituted without their key players, they're really not good at football. But if they can get through this, they're as well positioned as anybody. The Ravens, who are not 8-3 but are 7-3, their bye is already behind them. They're at 4-1. They have the third most difficult schedule left in the NFL. So you're not playing them because of that schedule, right? You're not betting that 4-1.
And they've been extraordinarily lucky to begin with.
They have been fortunate. The Patriots, who lead the AFC East by a half game, are plus 450. Their remaining strength of schedule is middling, 12th most difficult. Would you bet the Patriots? Dare you bet Bill Belichick and the Patriots to have the number one seed when all is said and done, the AFC? Come on. No, can't be, right?
Well, here's the deal with New England. The next 4 weeks are going to tell the story of their season.
Sure will.
Because they get Tennessee, Buffalo twice, and at Indianapolis.
Good luck.
If they somehow go 4-0, they're getting the number one seed.
They're not getting 4-0.
They're probably not going 4-0.
By the way, we say, Buffalo hasn't beaten anybody. New England hasn't actually beaten anybody that big either.
They wanted the Chargers. That's better than anything that the Bills have done.
No, that's for sure. But what I'm saying is they haven't beaten a murderer's row. The Titans have beaten a murderer's row. But take this game this weekend, New England, Tennessee, right? Everybody thinks New England's going to roll them because Tennessee just got crushed by the Texans. If the Titans win that game, dude, Titans are going to be minus to get the number one seed. They're going to be minus money after this week. But the way they looked last week, listen, you're not going to be that. This spread, I guessed 4.5 in that game. I don't think it should be 6. Now it's 5.5. It's settling. I think it's a little too many points because the Titans aren't that bad. Remember, they were -5 in turnovers against the Texans. That's unlikely to happen again. All right, this is the one that's going to intrigue people the most. The Chiefs are 8-1. The Chiefs have the 6th hardest remaining schedule. As I mentioned, the way that I saw that game on Sunday, Cowboys didn't have Tyron Smith. They didn't have Amari Cooper. They lost CeeDee Lamb for more than half that game. The Chiefs got about 4 non-calls in their favor, and the Chiefs won by all of 10. Everybody's all over the Chiefs again. Stop it. Chiefs are going to break people's hearts, man. I'm telling you right now. Would you play them 8-1 to get the number one seed, though?
It's getting to the point where it's a possibility, Gill.
It's a good number.
It's a good number. It's a possibility. Look, the whole AFC West is probably coming down to that Thursday night game in L.A. between the Chiefs and the Chargers. Because
Chargers have already won
beat them once.
Already beat them once. But even though they're getting the second game at SoFi, that was Heinz Field on Sunday.
That's going to be Arrowhead West in that Thursday night game.
That is it. If there's a negative home field advantage, that's what people should put into their models at SoFi. The Bills are 10-1. Their schedule no longer nearly as easy as it used to look. The remaining strength of schedule, that is, 13th, so middling. 10-1 on the Bills, I would never play it.
I'd rather have the Bills to miss the playoffs at 4-1 than that.
Chargers are 12-1. Schedule's relatively easy, but their defense is horrific.
If the defense was just passable, I would say that's worth a play, but no thank you.
Bengals 12-1, but it's the 4th hardest remaining schedule, and then the Browns are 100-1, hardest remaining schedule in the National Football League. And forget even about their schedule. They're just not very good at football right now.
Oh, and part of the reason that all these AFC North schedules look brutal is because they're all playing each other. So take it with a little bit of a grain of salt.
By the way, shout out BetMGM again. This is such a great market to have because this is fascinating to talk through. So if I said to you, first of all, would you make a bet on any of these?
Only one I'd consider is Kansas City.
That's
is the only one I'd consider at the numbers that we have here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Titans are probably appropriately the short shot for all the reasons stated, but at plus 175, too short to play. But the Chiefs at 8-1, oh, their schedule's too difficult. Can we flash up the Chiefs schedule in our remaining here 20 seconds here? I don't know, man. Chiefs are pretty. That's a rough schedule the rest of the way for the Chiefs because they've got the bye this week, but then it's Broncos home, Raiders home. Okay, at Chargers, home Steelers, at Bengals, at Broncos. Actually, it's not that terrible.
Just because all those teams are over 500, even though none of them are really that great.
Yeah, that might be the best bet, but I don't believe in the Chiefs at this point.